The white dress that followed. This is a true story. I kept this secret for 23 years. 23 years of watching my father tell and retell the tale of the filthy white dress that followed us all the way to Tijuana. 23 years of nodding along, laughing at the right moments, pretending I knew nothing more than he did. But I knew the truth. I was the one who brought that dress back, every single time. And the accidents along the way, the knife that buried itself in a woman's stomach in Guadalajara, the boiling water that poured over a girl's face in Tepic. I was the one who made them happen. My hands, my feet, my 12-year-old body moving through the world like a puppet on invisible strings. I did not know what I was doing. That is what I told myself for 2 decades. That is what I still tell myself now, in the moments between sleep and waking when the memories come flooding back like water through a crack in a dam. There were voices in my head. 2 of them, a little girl and an old woman. They whispered instructions and my body obeyed. They demanded blood and I provided it. They needed the dress to travel far from where they died, and I carried it for them mile after mile through the darkness of Mexican highways. This is the story my father never knew completely, until it was too late. In 1994, I was 12 years old. My father, Don Aurelio Mendoza, drove long-haul trucks for a living. The rig belonged to his uncle, a man I met only twice in my entire childhood and remembered nothing about except the smell of cheap cigars on his clothes. But that truck, that massive steel beast with its wide cabin and refrigerated cargo hold, became our second home during those long journeys across Mexico. My father was not a man of many words. His hands were thick and calloused from years of gripping the steering wheel, and his eyes, brown as coffee beans left too long in the sun, always looked straight ahead. As if life itself was just another highway that needed conquering, he rarely smiled after my mother died. But when he did smile, when something I said or did cracked through that wall of grief he had built around himself, the warmth of it could make me forget everything else. My mother passed when I was 7. Cancer. Such a small word for something that took so much. I remember the hospital room, the tubes, the beeping machines, and the way her hand felt in mine at the end, cold and thin as paper. After the funeral, after they lowered her casket into the red earth of the San Juan cemetery, something in my father went quiet. He still fed me, clothed me, made sure I went to school. But the laughter was gone. The stories he used to tell at dinner were gone. The man who used to carry me on my shoulders through the market on Sunday mornings was gone. What remained was a ghost wearing my father's face. He never left me behind, though. That was the one thing I could count on. Whenever he had a long haul, 3 days, 4 days, sometimes a whole week on the road, he would ask if I wanted to come. Not because he needed company. My father could drive for 16 hours straight without saying a word. He asked because he needed to know I was safe. He needed me where he could see me. I was a lonely child. No siblings. Few friends. The other kids at school thought I was strange, too quiet, too lost in my own head. They were not wrong. After my mother died, I retreated into myself. I built a world inside my mind where she was still alive, where I could still hear her voice singing in the kitchen, where I could still smell the cinnamon and vanilla of her cooking. It was easier to live there than in the real world where her absence was a wound that never healed. That loneliness made me vulnerable. I understand that now. The voices that would later invade my mind, they chose me precisely because I was alone, because I was broken. Because a child with no anchor is easy to steer. The trip to Tijuana was one of the longest we ever took. From Mexico City, we would cross nearly the entire width of the country, passing through cities I only knew from textbooks. Morelia, Guadalajara, Tepic, Mazatlan. 4 days on the road, maybe more if we hit delays. My father said it would be an adventure. I believed him. If I had known what was waiting for us on those highways, I would have locked myself in my room and never come out. The cabin of my father's truck was a world unto itself. 2 seats up front covered in brown leather that had cracked and faded over the years. Behind the seats, a small sleeping compartment with a fold-out bed, barely wide enough for a child, a battery-powered fan that squeaked when it turned, and a tiny window that looked out at the road behind us. On the dashboard, wedged between the speedometer and the radio, was a photograph of my mother. The edges were curling from the heat, and her face had faded to a yellow-brown ghost of what it once was. But she was there, watching over us. A small wooden cross hung from the rearview mirror. My father was not a religious man, not in the way my grandmother was with her rosaries and her saints and her endless prayers. But he kept that cross because my mother had given it to him on their wedding day. He said it kept him safe on the road. I wanted to believe him. The smell inside the cabin was something you never forgot. Diesel fuel and old leather. The faint sweetness of the air freshener my father hung from the mirror, pine-scented, though it had long since lost most of its power. And underneath it all, the smell of two people living in a small space for days at a time. Sweat, breath. The food we ate from roadside stands wrapped in napkins that left grease stains on the seats. Outside the cabin, Mexico stretched in every direction. During the day, the landscape changed constantly, from the sprawling chaos of Mexico City to the green hills of Michoacan to the dry plains of Jalisco. But at night it all looked the same. Darkness. An ocean of black that swallowed everything except the narrow beam of our headlights. 2 lanes of asphalt cutting through nothing. No street lights, no houses, no other cars for miles at a time. That isolation was part of the job. My father said he preferred driving at night because there was less traffic, fewer idiots trying to cut him off or slow him down. But I think he also liked the silence, the feeling of being the only 2 people alive in the universe, hurtling through the void in a metal cocoon. I did not know then how dangerous that isolation could be, how it made us vulnerable, how it meant that when things went wrong, there would be no one to help us, no one to hear us scream. We left Mexico City on a Thursday afternoon just as the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon. The clock on the dashboard read 4:47 p.m. I remember because I was watching it, counting the minutes until we cleared the city traffic and hit the open road. My father had filled the tank that morning and checked the tires twice. He was meticulous about these things. A breakdown on a remote highway could mean hours of waiting, lost money, angry customers. He could not afford mistakes. I had packed a small bag with clothes, a toothbrush, and 3 comic books I'd already read twice. My father told me to bring something to keep me busy, but I knew I would spend most of the trip staring out the window, watching the world go by, lost in my own thoughts. As we merged onto the highway, heading west, my father turned on the radio. A talk show, men arguing about soccer, their voices rising and falling in passionate debate about teams and players I did not care about. The sound filled the cabin, pushing back the silence that always seemed to gather in the corners. But as we drove further from the city, the signal began to fade. Static crept into the voices, turning words into noise. My father tried adjusting the dial, but there was nothing else to catch. Just empty frequencies and the hiss of dead air. He turned it off. The silence returned thicker than before. I must have dozed off at some point because when I opened my eyes again, the world outside had changed. The city was gone. The hills were gone. There was only darkness and the white lines of the highway rushing toward us like an endless river. The clock read 11:47 p.m. My father's face was lit by the green glow of the dashboard instruments. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, unblinking, as if he could see something in that darkness that I could not. That was when I noticed something strange. Far ahead, at the very edge of our headlights' reach, there was a white spot on the road. Small at first, like a piece of trash maybe, or a dead animal. But as we got closer, I realized it was moving, rising, lifting off the asphalt as if pulled by an invisible string, not blowing in the wind. There was no wind. The trees on either side of the road stood perfectly still, their branches frozen against the night sky like the arms of corpses reaching for heaven, rising, straight up, deliberately. It was a dress, a white dress, long and simple, the kind that women in the countryside wore. It hung in the air about 3 feet off the ground, the fabric spreading out as if someone was wearing it. But there was no one inside, just empty cloth suspended in nothing waiting for us. The smell hit me before we reached it. Damp earth, rotting leaves, something older and darker underneath like meat left out in the sun. The smell of graves. The smell of things that should have stayed buried. My father did not slow down. The dress filled our windshield for one frozen moment. I could see the stains on it now, brown splotches on the white fabric, black marks near the waist and chest. Then there was a soft sound, barely audible over the engine, like a hand brushing against cloth. And it was gone. Swept under the truck or thrown aside by our passing. My father exhaled slowly. Probably just something someone dropped, he said. Or the wind blew it from somewhere. I nodded. The wind. Of course it was the wind, but there was no wind. And the dress had not blown sideways the way things do when the wind catches them. It had risen straight up, like someone standing, like someone waiting. I turned and looked through the small window at the back of the cabin. The road behind us was empty, just darkness eating the distance we had traveled. But I could feel something watching me. I could feel eyes that were not there pressing against the back of my skull like cold fingers. 30 seconds later, I had forgotten, or at least I thought I had forgotten. We stopped in Morelia around midnight. A truck stop on the edge of the highway, a small island of fluorescent light in the sea of darkness. A few other rigs were already parked there, their engines silent, their drivers sleeping or eating in the small restaurant attached to the gas station. My father turned off the engine and stretched. I could hear his joints popping, his spine releasing the tension of hours behind the wheel. "Go use the bathroom," he said. "I will fill up the tank." I climbed down from the cabin, my feet crunching on the gravel. The air outside was cold, much colder than I expected. My breath came out in small white clouds that dissolved almost instantly. The bathroom was around the back of the gas station, a concrete block with 2 doors and a flickering light above them. I did my business quickly, not wanting to spend more time in that place than necessary. The smell was bad ammonia and something worse, and the single light bulb cast shadows that seemed to move when I was not looking directly at them. When I came back around the building, I saw my father standing in front of the truck. He was not moving, just standing there staring at something I could not see from my angle. "Papa," he did not answer. I walked closer, closer, until I could see what he was looking at, the white dress. It was tangled in the front grille of the truck, caught between the metal bars like an animal in a trap. Part of it hung down almost to the ground, dragging in the dirt. The rest was wrapped around the radiator as if it had tried to crawl inside. Under the yellow lights of the truck stop, I could see it clearly now. The stains were not just brown. Some of them were dark red, almost black in the places where the blood had dried thickest. And the black marks I had seen before, they were not burns, they were rot. Patches of fabric that had decayed and turned to something like wet paper ready to fall apart at a touch. The smell. God, the smell. Not just earth and rot now, something else. Something sweet and sick like fruit left to spoil in a closed room, like flesh going bad. Like death itself had seeped into every fiber of that dress and made a home there. My father reached out. His hand trembled slightly, but he grabbed the dress and pulled. It came free from the grill with a wet tearing sound, as if it did not want to let go. He balled it up in his fists and walked to the nearest trash can, threw it in, turned around and walked back without looking. "Done," he said. "Let us get something to eat." I nodded and followed him toward the restaurant. But before we went inside, I looked back at the trash can, just for a second, and I swear on my mother's grave, I saw the dress move inside that can. A slow, deliberate shifting, like something underneath was trying to sit up. I blinked, looked again. Nothing. Probably the wind, I told myself. Probably just the wind settling the fabric. There was no wind. The next morning, as the sun rose over the mountains to the east and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, my father stood beside the truck with a face as white as bone. The dress was hanging from the door handle on my side of the cabin, draped there like a coat someone had left to dry. The same stains, the same rot, the same impossible presence. It followed us, my father said. His voice cracked on the last word. He tried to laugh to make it sound like a joke. Neither of us laughed. The trash can was 20 meters away. We had both watched him throw the dress inside. We had both walked away without looking back. Neither of us had returned to that can during the night. And yet here it was, unless someone had brought it back. Unless someone had reached into that trash can, pulled out the dress, walked across the parking lot in the middle of the night, and hung it on our door handle. Unless that someone had been me. We arrived in Zapopan the following afternoon when the sun hung directly overhead and turned the streets into rivers of shimmering heat. Zapopan sat on the edge of Guadalajara like a loyal dog waiting at its master's feet, close enough to feel the pulse of the larger city, but far enough to have its own identity. My father knew someone here, an old friend from his youth, a man named Hector Villarreal, who had married well and now ran a small food stall that served breakfast to factory workers in the early morning hours. The house was modest, built from red brick that had faded to a dusty rose color under years of sun and rain. A metal gate guarded the front, painted green once, but now more rust than paint. Bougainvillea climbed the walls in explosions of purple and pink, the only things that seemed truly alive in the oppressive heat. Hector came out to greet us before my father even turned off the engine. He was a large man, round in the middle, with a smile that seemed too big for his face and a laugh that echoed off the walls of nearby houses. He embraced my father like a brother, slapping his back hard enough to raise dust from his shirt, and then turned to me with eyes wide in exaggerated surprise. "This is Sebastian," he said. "Last time I saw this boy, he barely reached my knee. Now look at him. Almost a man." I managed a weak smile as he ruffled my hair with a hand that smelled of onions and cooking oil. His wife, Doña Carmen, appeared in the doorway. She was small, delicate, with silver streaking her black hair and deep lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent squinting against kitchen smoke. She welcomed us with the quiet warmth of someone who had fed countless strangers and never asked for anything in return. Come in," she said. "I have food ready. You must be starving after such a long drive." We parked the truck in an empty lot across the street from their house, a patch of dirt and weeds surrounded by a chain-link fence. My father locked the cabin, carefully checking the doors twice, and I wondered if he was thinking about the dress. It was still out there somewhere in the garbage at that truck stop in Morelia, miles behind us now, gone, or so we believed. The meal Doña Carmen prepared was simple but abundant. Chilaquiles drowning in green salsa topped with crumbled cheese and sour cream. Fried eggs with yolks that ran like liquid gold when you cut into them. Black beans mashed smooth and spread across warm tortillas. Fresh orange juice squeezed that morning, pulpy and sweet. I ate like I had not seen food in weeks. My father and Hector talked between bites, their conversation drifting from memories of their youth to complaints about the economy to gossip about people I had never met. Doña Carmen moved between the kitchen and the table, refilling plates, pouring more juice, insisting we eat more even when our stomachs threatened to burst. After the meal, my father announced that we needed to rest before continuing our journey. The plan was to sleep for a few hours, eat again in the evening, and then drive through the night toward Tepic. Hector offered us beds inside the house, but my father declined. He said he slept better in the cabin, that the bed in Hector's guest room was too soft for his back. I think the truth was simpler. He wanted to be near the truck, near our only means of escape if something went wrong. I climbed into the sleeping compartment behind the seats, pulled the thin blanket over my body, and closed my eyes. The heat was stifling despite the small fan whirring in the corner, and the leather seats gave off a smell like something cooking slowly in an oven. But exhaustion won over discomfort, and soon enough I drifted into a dreamless sleep. The screaming woke me. It came from the front of the cabin, raw and desperate, the sound of a man fighting for his life. I jerked upright, heart slamming against my ribs, and scrambled over the seats toward my father. He was thrashing in the driver's seat, his hands clawing at his face, his legs kicking against the dashboard. In the dim light filtering through the windshield, I could see something white wrapped around his head, covering his eyes, covering his mouth, smothering him. The dress. "Papa," I screamed. "Papa, wake up." He could not hear me, or maybe he could, but his body was too busy fighting to respond. His fingers found the edge of the fabric and pulled, yanking it away from his face with a sound like tearing paper. He threw it to the floor of the cabin and sat there gasping, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face in rivers. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then my father looked down at the crumpled dress lying at his feet, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Pure animal fear. "It was on my face," he whispered. I was sleeping, and something was pressing down on my face. I could not breathe. I thought I was dying. His hands were shaking. My father's hands, which had never trembled in all my 12 years of life, were shaking like leaves in a storm. I looked at the dress. Even in the shadows of the cabin I could see the stains, the patches of rot, the unmistakable shape of something that had once belonged to a human being. It lay there like a dead animal, and yet I could have sworn it was breathing. A slow, subtle rise and fall, as if something inside it was sleeping. "You threw it away," I said, "in Morelia. You threw it in the garbage." "I know, then how is it here?" He did not answer. He did not have an answer. My father grabbed the dress with both hands, his face twisted in disgust, and stuffed it into a plastic bag he found under the seat. He tied the bag closed with 3 knots, as if that could contain whatever evil lived inside those fibers, and climbed out of the cabin. I watched through the window as he walked to the back of the lot, where a row of dead trees marked the boundary between the property and the wilderness beyond. He hurled the bag into the bushes with all his strength, and I saw it disappear into the brown tangle of branches and thorns. He stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where it had landed. Then he turned and walked back to the truck. "Stay here," he said when he reached the cabin. "I am going inside to have coffee with Hector. Do not leave the truck." He closed the door before I could respond. I sat in the silence for what felt like hours. The heat pressed against me from all sides, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down on the empty lot, and I could see heat waves rising from the dirt like spirits escaping from the earth. I tried to read one of my comic books, but the words blurred together on the page. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dress wrapped around my father's face. I tried to think about anything else, anything at all, but my mind kept returning to the same questions. How did it get here? How did it find us? What did it want? And then I heard the voice. At first I thought it was the wind, or maybe the fan, its motor grinding in a new and unpleasant way, but there was no wind, and the fan was off. The sound came from inside my head, not from my ears, from somewhere deeper, somewhere that had no name but that I could feel with perfect clarity, like a finger pressing against the inside of my skull. Bring it back. I jerked upright, looking around the cabin. Empty. No one there but me. Bring it back. Now, before your father returns. A girl's voice. High and thin, like wind whistling through a crack in a window. Young, maybe younger than me. "Who are you?" I tried to say, but the words would not come out. My throat had closed up, my tongue had turned to stone, and all I could do was sit there paralyzed as the voice continued. "Go to the bushes, find the bag, bring the dress back to the truck." "No!" The word formed in my mind, clear and defiant. "No, I will not." Another voice joined the first, older this time, cracked and dry like old leather left out in the sun. A grandmother's voice, but without any of the warmth that word implied. "You will do as we say, little one, or we will make you watch your father die." I felt something then, a pressure behind my eyes building and building until I thought my head would explode, and with the pressure came images. My father in the driver's seat, blood pouring from his throat, my father lying on the ground, his chest crushed by invisible hands. My father screaming as fire consumed him from the inside out. "Stop," I begged, "please stop, then do what we say." My body moved without my permission. I watched my hands open the cabin door. I watched my feet carry me across the lot toward the bushes where my father had thrown the dress. I watched myself kneel in the dirt and reach into the thorns, feeling them tear at my skin, drawing blood that dripped onto the dry leaves below. The pain was real. I could feel every scratch, every puncture, every drop of blood leaving my body, but I could not stop. I could not even slow down. My fingers closed around the plastic bag. I pulled it free from the branches. "Good," the old woman's voice said. "Now hide it, under the seat. Do not let anyone see." I walked back to the truck, opened the door, stuffed the bag under the passenger seat, pushing it deep into the shadows where no one would think to look. When my father returned an hour later, he found me sitting exactly where he had left me, a comic book open on my lap, my face carefully blank. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "Just reading." He nodded, satisfied, and climbed into the driver's seat. I did not tell him about the bag under his seat. I did not tell him about the voices in my head. I did not tell him that his son had become something else, something that walked and talked like Sebastian but was no longer fully in control. The truth was a stone I could not lift. The confession was a door I could not open, and so I sat in silence, carrying the weight of what I had done, feeling it pressed down on my chest like a hand trying to stop my heart. The sun was beginning to set when I heard the voices again. My father was still inside with Hector, drinking coffee and talking about old times. Doña Carmen was in the kitchen preparing dinner. I was supposed to be resting in the truck, but rest was impossible now. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them whispering. "Go inside," the girl said. "To the kitchen." I do not want to. That was not a request. The pressure returned sharper this time, like needles being driven into my brain. I gasped and grabbed my head, trying to push the pain away, but it only grew worse. The kitchen. Now. I climbed out of the truck. The walk from the lot to Hector's house took maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Each step was a battle. My legs wanted to turn around to run back to the truck to hide under the blankets until morning, but whatever controlled them now had other plans. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The house was cool and dark compared to the furnace outside. I could hear voices from the living room, my father and Hector laughing about something, their words muffled by distance. Ahead of me, a narrow hallway led to the kitchen where I could see Doña Carmen moving about her back to the door. "Find the biggest knife," the old woman instructed, "the one she uses for cutting meat." My feet carried me down the hallway. My eyes scanned the kitchen, taking in the details with a clarity that did not feel like my own. The gas stove with its blue flames licking the bottom of a pot. The wooden cutting board stained with years of use. The knife block on the counter, 6 handles protruding from the slots like the fingers of a buried hand. The biggest one, the one on the left. I walked to the counter, my hand reached out. My fingers closed around the wooden handle of the largest knife, a heavy blade meant for chopping through bone. Now put it on the edge of the sink, the blade facing outward, at this angle. Yes, exactly like that. I did not understand. Why would they want me to move a knife? What possible purpose could this serve? But my body obeyed. It always obeyed now. I placed the knife on the edge of the sink, balancing it carefully so that the blade hung over the edge, pointing toward the spot where someone would stand when washing dishes. Then I stepped back, looked at my work, and felt a cold satisfaction that did not belong to me. "Good," the girl said. "Now leave. Go back to the truck. Act normal." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. Doña Carmen never saw me. She was stirring something on the stove, humming a tune I did not recognize, completely unaware that a 12-year-old boy had just turned her kitchen into a trap. 10 minutes later, the screaming started. This time I did not have to imagine what had happened. I heard it all from the truck. The crash of the pot hitting the floor. The high, piercing shriek of a woman in agony. The thunder of running feet as my father and Hector rushed to the kitchen. I stayed where I was. My hands were folded in my lap. My face was calm. Inside I was screaming. "What did you do?" I demanded. "What did you make me do?" "We did nothing," the old woman replied. "You did it, your hands, your choice. I did not choose this." Silence. Then a laugh cold and brittle as breaking ice. "Choice is an illusion, little one. You will learn that soon enough." I wanted to confess. When my father came running out of the house, 10 minutes later, his shirt stained with blood that was not his own, I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and tell him everything. I placed the knife. I did it. I am the reason Doña Carmen is bleeding on the kitchen floor. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. My throat closed, my tongue went dead, and all I could do was stare at my father with wide, innocent eyes. "What happened?" I asked. "An accident," he said, his voice hollow. Carmen was reaching for a pot, and the knife fell, and she could not stop, and the blade went into her stomach. He ran his hands through his hair, leaving streaks of blood on his forehead. "There is so much blood. Hector called an ambulance. We should go. Yes, we should go." My father looked at me for a long moment. I could see the questions forming in his eyes, the doubt, the suspicion that something was not right. But he said nothing. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and we drove away from that house with its red brick walls and its purple flowers and its kitchen floor running red with the blood of an innocent woman. I did not look back. Somewhere in my head the voices were laughing. We reached Tepic in the dead hours of the night when the world feels thin and the boundary between the living and the dead becomes difficult to see. The gas station we stopped at was a small one, a concrete island in a sea of darkness with a convenience store attached and a single attendant who looked like she had not slept in days. My father filled the tank while I stretched my legs outside the truck. The air was damp and cool, carrying the promise of rain that would never come. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and then fell silent. I should have been exhausted. We had been driving for hours, and before that, the chaos at Hector's house had drained whatever energy I had left. But I was wide awake. The voices in my head saw to that. They had been quiet since we left Guadalajara, but I could feel them watching, waiting, like vultures circling above a dying animal. My father went inside to buy coffee. I stayed by the truck, leaning against the warm metal, staring at the stars scattered across the black canvas of the sky. That was when they spoke again. Inside, the old woman said, "There's a pot of water boiling on the stove behind the counter. Do you see it?" I looked through the window of the convenience store. The attendant was talking to my father, gesturing toward the coffee machine. And behind the counter, on a small gas burner, a pot of water bubbled and steamed. "Push it. No." The word came from somewhere deep, somewhere the voices had not yet reached, a last fortress of resistance holding out against the siege. "I will not hurt anyone else." The pain hit me like a fist. I doubled over, clutching my stomach, biting my lip to keep from crying out. It felt like someone was twisting my intestines, wrapping them around a rod and pulling. "You do not have a choice," the girl hissed. "You never had a choice. Please," I begged. "She is innocent. She has not done anything to you." "Neither did we," the old woman replied. "And yet we are dead, buried under a road like garbage, left to rot for 22 years while the world forgot we ever existed." The pain intensified. I fell to my knees in the gravel, gritting my teeth, feeling hot tears stream down my face. "We need blood to travel," the old woman continued. "Blood gives us strength. Blood allows us to leave the dress and move on our own. Every drop that spills brings us closer to freedom. I cannot. You will." My body stood up. My legs carried me toward the convenience store door. My hand pushed it open. The attendant looked up when I entered. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes that reminded me of my mother's. She smiled at me, a polite but distant smile, and went back to her conversation with my father. I walked toward the counter. My father glanced at me but said nothing. He was paying for the coffee, counting out coins from his pocket. The pot was right there, inches away, steam rising from its surface, fogging the air. Now the voices commanded. My hand shot out. My palm pressed against the side of the pot. I felt the heat searing and immediate, but the pain seemed distant, muffled, as if it belonged to someone else. I pushed. The pot tipped. The water cascaded over the edge of the counter, a waterfall of liquid fire that hit the attendant square in the face. Her scream was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was not just pain. It was the sound of a soul being torn apart, the sound of a world ending, the sound of innocence burning away like paper in a flame. She fell backward, hands clawing at her face, steam rising from her skin. My father lunged forward to help her, knocking over displays, sending candy bars and cigarette lighters scattering across the floor. I stood there, watching, feeling nothing because the voices would not let me feel anything. "Good," the old woman said. "Now go to the truck, get the dress, put it on the steering wheel." "Why? So your father will know, so he will stop throwing it away. So he will understand that there is no escape." I walked out of the store. The screaming continued behind me, mixing with my father's shouts for someone to call an ambulance. I opened the truck door, reached under the seat, and pulled out the plastic bag. The dress was cold in my hands, cold and damp, and somehow alive. I draped it over the steering wheel, arranging it carefully so that it would be the first thing my father saw when he returned. Then I stepped back, closed the door, and waited. When my father came running out of the store 5 minutes later, his face was gray and his hands were shaking. He stopped at the truck door and stared through the window at the white dress hanging from the wheel like a flag of surrender. I saw his lips move, saw him say something I could not hear. Then he looked at me, and in that moment I think he knew. Not the details, not the truth, but something. Some part of him understood that his son was no longer just his son. But he said nothing. He opened the door, took the dress down from the wheel, and for the first time he did not throw it away. He folded it carefully, almost reverently, and placed it on the seat between us. "Maybe it wants to be taken somewhere," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe if we take it where it needs to go, it will leave us alone." I nodded. It was all I could do. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. A new day was coming. But for us, the darkness was just beginning. As we pulled out of the gas station and merged onto the highway toward Mazatlan, my father kept glancing at the dress between us. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight that his knuckles turned white. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were hollow. He had made his decision. He would not fight anymore. He would carry the dress wherever it needed to go, would do whatever it wanted, would surrender to the inevitable if that was what it took to survive. He did not know that the dress did not want to be carried. It wanted blood, and it would have more before we reached Tijuana. The voices went quiet as we drove into the rising sun. Not gone, just waiting, conserving their strength for whatever came next. I sat in my seat and stared out the window at the desert racing past. My reflection looked back at me from the glass, pale and hollow-eyed, a stranger wearing my face. Somewhere deep inside, in the last part of me that was still truly mine, I made a decision. When this was over, if I survived, I would bury everything. The truth, the guilt, the memories of what my hands had done. I would lock them away in a vault so deep that even I would forget where I put the key. It was the only way I could keep living. It was also the first step on a road that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The sun was rising over Mazatlan when the world changed forever. We had driven through the night without stopping, my father's hands welded to the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead with the intensity of a man who knew that looking away even for a second might cost him everything. The dress lay between us on the seat, folded neatly, almost respectfully, as if it were a sleeping child we were afraid to wake. I had not slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Doña Carmen on the kitchen floor, blood pooling around her body. I saw the girl at the gas station, her face disappearing behind a curtain of steam. I saw my own hands, small and pale and treacherous, doing things I had not chosen to do. The voices had been silent for hours. That silence was worse than their whispers. It meant they were waiting. It meant something was coming. The highway hugged the coastline now, and through my window I could see the Pacific Ocean stretching toward the horizon. The water was calm, almost glassy, reflecting the pink and orange of the dawn sky like a mirror held up to heaven. On the other side of the road, the desert rolled away in waves of brown and yellow, dotted with cacti that stood like sentinels guarding secrets older than memory. The air inside the cabin had grown thick with the smell of sweat and fear. My father had not spoken in hours, had not even looked at me since we left Tepic. I wondered if he suspected the truth. I wondered if some part of him knew that his son was no longer entirely his son. The clock on the dashboard read 5:47 a.m. when it happened. A sound like a gunshot filled the cabin. I jerked in my seat, my heart leaping into my throat, and turned to see my window dropping. Not slowly the way it did when you pressed the button. Instantly, as if an invisible hand had grabbed the glass and yanked it down with all its strength. Wind exploded into the cabin, cold and sharp and tasting of salt. It whipped my hair across my face, stung my eyes, made breathing difficult. I reached for the button to raise the window, but before my fingers could touch it, the dress moved. It did not flutter or shift the way fabric does when caught in a breeze. It rose, lifted itself off the seat as if pulled by strings attached to the sky. For one frozen moment it hung there between my father and me, suspended in the chaos of wind and noise, its stained folds spreading out like wings. Then it flew, out through the open window, into the dawn light, into the world beyond our metal cage. I twisted in my seat, looking back through the rear window, trying to track its path, but it was already gone, swallowed by the brightness of the rising sun, vanished into the emptiness of the coastal highway. My father slammed on the brakes. The truck shuddered and groaned, tires screaming against asphalt, and we came to a stop on the shoulder of the road. He sat there, hands still gripping the wheel, staring straight ahead at nothing. The window. His voice was hoarse, barely audible over the idling engine. "Why did you open the window? I did not open it." The words came out shaky, defensive. It just went down by itself. I did not touch anything. He turned to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, and something else. Suspicious, afraid, not of the dress or the window or the impossibility of what had just happened. Afraid of me. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. Then he turned away, put the truck in gear, and pulled back onto the highway. We did not speak again for a long time, but something had changed. I could feel it in my bones, in the marrow of my being. A weight that had been pressing down on me for days, suffocating me from the inside, had suddenly lifted. The air in my lungs felt cleaner. My thoughts felt clearer. My body felt like my own again. The voices were gone, not quiet. Not waiting, gone. As if they had flown out the window with the dress carried away on the morning wind to wherever they needed to be. For the first time since Morelia, I was alone in my own head, and with that solitude came memory. It crashed over me like a wave breaking against rocks. Every moment I had lost, every action I had taken, without knowing every terrible thing my hands had done while my mind was locked away in a dark corner of my skull. I remembered all of it. I remembered waking in the middle of the night at the truck stop in Morelia, my body moving without my permission, my feet carrying me across the gravel to the trash can where my father had thrown the dress. I remembered reaching in, feeling the cold, damp fabric against my fingers, pulling it out and hiding it in my jacket before anyone could see. I remembered Zapopan. The walk to the bushes behind Hector's house, the thorns tearing at my skin as I retrieved the dress my father had thrown away. The blood dripping from my palms onto the dry leaves and the voice in my head telling me I was doing well, that I was a good boy, that everything would be over soon. I remembered the kitchen, the knife, the way I had calculated the angle, the position, the precise spot where Doña Carmen would be standing when she reached for the pot on the stove. I had turned her kitchen into a trap, and I had done it with the cold efficiency of a machine. I remembered Tepic, the pot of boiling water, the girl's face before and after, the sound of her screams echoing in my ears as I walked out of the store, my hands steady, my expression blank, my soul screaming silently inside a body that no longer belonged to me. I had done all of it. My hands, my feet, my 12-year-old body used as a weapon by something ancient and angry and desperate to be free. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I doubled over in my seat, gasping for air, feeling tears stream down my face. My stomach heaved, and I thought I might vomit, might expel the horror, along with everything else inside me. Sebastian, my father's voice distant and concerned. "Are you all right?" I could not answer. I could not do anything except sit there, shaking as the full weight of what I had done crushed me into the seat. I was 12 years old. I was a child. I should have been worrying about school and comic books and whether the girl who sat next to me in class would ever notice me. Instead, I was carrying the burden of sins I had not chosen to commit, of blood I had not wanted to spill, of a darkness that had crawled inside me and made me its home. You did not choose this, I told myself. You were not in control. It was them, the voices, the things inside the dress. But the hands that moved the knife were mine. The hands that pushed the pot were mine. The voices may have given the orders, but my body had carried them out. How could I separate myself from that? How could I claim innocence when the evidence of my guilt was carved into the flesh of two women who might never fully recover? Tell him, a part of me whispered. Tell him everything. He is your father. He will understand. But another part, the part that had learned to survive during those terrible days on the road, knew better. If I told my father the truth, he would never look at me the same way again. Every time he saw me, he would see the monster that had hidden inside his son. Every time he heard my voice, he would wonder if it was really me speaking or something else wearing my face. I could not bear that. I had already lost my mother. I could not lose my father, too. So I swallowed my confession. I wiped my tears. I sat up straight and told him I was fine, just tired, just car-sick from the winding road. And the lie settled into my bones like poison, seeping into every part of me, becoming as much a part of who I was as my name or my face. The burden of truth is heavy, but the weight of silence can crush a soul so slowly that you do not notice until there is nothing left to save. We reached Tijuana 2 days later. The journey from Mazatlan had been uneventful, almost peaceful. No dress appearing out of nowhere, no voices whispering commands, no accidents or injuries or unexplained phenomena. Just mile after mile of highway, the ocean on one side, the desert on the other, and the two of us sitting in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. My father delivered his cargo to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, collected his payment, and found us a cheap hotel near the beach. The room was small and smelled of mildew, with 2 narrow beds separated by a nightstand that held a lamp with a burnt-out bulb and a Bible with a cracked spine. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the couple next door arguing about money, their voices rising and falling in waves of anger and despair. My father fell asleep almost immediately. The exhaustion of the past week had finally caught up with him, and within minutes of lying down, he was snoring softly, his face relaxed for the first time since Morelia. I lay in my own bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of waves breaking on the shore. Sleep would not come. Every time I closed my eyes, the memories returned, vivid and merciless, replaying on the inside of my eyelids like a film I could not turn off. Around midnight, I gave up trying. I slipped out of bed, pulled on my shoes, and crept to the door. My father did not stir. I eased the door open, stepped into the hallway, and made my way outside. The beach was empty at this hour. The tourists and locals who crowded its sands during the day had all gone home, leaving behind only footprints and the occasional piece of litter. The moon hung full and bright in the sky, painting the water silver and casting long shadows across the sand. I walked to the water's edge and sat down, hugging my knees to my chest. Feeling the cold breeze off the ocean raise goosebumps on my arms, the waves rolled in with a steady rhythm, whispering secrets in a language I could not understand. I did not know why I had come out here. I did not know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed to be alone, truly alone, without my father's presence as a constant reminder of the lies I was keeping from him. Or maybe something had called me here. Something I could not yet see. You should not be out here alone at night, little one. The voice came from behind me. I spun around my heart, slamming against my ribs, and saw her. She stood perhaps 10 feet away at the edge where the dry sand met the wet. An old woman dressed in black from head to toe, her white hair loose and flowing in the breeze like a banner of surrender. Her face was deeply lined, carved by time and suffering into a map of sorrows I could not begin to comprehend. But it was her eyes that froze me in place. They had no whites, no irises, no pupils, just darkness, absolute and complete, like two holes punched through the fabric of reality into the void beyond. I knew those eyes. I'd felt them watching me from inside my own skull for 4 days. Who are you? The words came out as a whisper barely audible over the crash of the waves. The old woman smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had forgotten what kindness meant, who had spent so long in the dark that the light no longer held any meaning. "You do not remember me?" she asked, tilting her head like a bird examining something it might want to eat. "I have been with you since Morelia. I have whispered in your ear. I have moved your hands. I have made you my instrument." The voice, the old woman's voice. The one that had commanded me to place the knife, to push the pot, to bring the dress back again and again. "You I breathed. You did this to me. I did nothing to you that you did not allow." She took a step closer, and the temperature around me dropped. The warm beach breeze turned to ice, and I could see my breath fogging in front of my face. "You invited me in, little one. Your loneliness, your grief, your desperate need to be something more than a forgotten child in a forgotten corner of the world. All of it opened doors that should have remained closed. I did not invite you. I did not ask for any of this. No one asked," she agreed. "But asking is not required. Suffering is enough. Loss is enough. A heart broken in just the right way is a welcome mat for things like me." She was closer now, close enough that I could smell her. Not damp earth or rotting leaves, but something older, the smell of centuries, the smell of patience turned to stone. "What are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me? I am Esperanza." The name seemed to echo, bouncing off invisible walls, repeating and distorting until it sounded like a chorus of the damned. And the child whose voice you also heard, that was my daughter Lucia. We were killed in 1972 and buried beneath a road near Morelia while the concrete was still wet. For 22 years we lay there feeling the weight of the world pressing down on us, hearing the cars and trucks pass overhead screaming for help that never came. She stopped directly in front of me, now close enough to touch. The cold radiating from her body was so intense that I felt my skin going numb, my joints stiffening, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. Last year they found our bones. They dug us up, identified us, gave us a proper burial. But the dress, my dress, the one I was wearing when they killed me, they left it on the road, discarded it like trash, like I was nothing, like we were nothing. Tears were streaming down my face now, freezing on my cheeks almost as soon as they formed. I felt sorry for you, you and your daughter. What happened to you was terrible. Terrible does not begin to describe it, she hissed. And for a moment her face flickered, showing me something beneath the human mask she wore. Something with too many teeth and too few features, something that existed in angles that the human eye was not meant to perceive. We were not just killed, little one. We were erased, wiped from existence as if we had never been born. And for 22 years we waited in the dark, feeling our hatred grow, feeling our need for justice curdle into something darker. So you used me, I said the words bitter on my tongue. You took over my body and made me hurt people. Innocent people who had nothing to do with what happened to you. Innocent. She laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking, like bones snapping, like the death rattle of a world choking on its own blood. No one is innocent, little one. Every living thing carries the weight of sins committed and sins to come. The woman in Guadalajara, the girl in Tepic, they were not random, they were chosen. Their blood was the price of our freedom. Their suffering was the fuel that allowed us to finally leave that dress and travel on our own. You could have asked. I was crying openly now, the tears coming faster than the cold could freeze them. You could have explained. Maybe I would have helped you willingly. Would you? She leaned closer, her black eyes boring into mine. Would you have agreed to stab a woman in the stomach? Would you have agreed to pour boiling water on a girl's face? Would you have done these things willingly, knowing the pain they would cause, the scars they would leave? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that I was the kind of person who would sacrifice anything to help a suffering soul, even if that sacrifice meant hurting others. But I could not, because I knew the truth. I was not that person, no one was. You see, Esperanza, said her voice softening almost to gentleness. This is why we did not ask. This is why we took what we needed without permission, because permission would never have been granted. And we were tired of waiting, tired of suffering, tired of being forgotten. She reached out and placed her hand on my cheek. Her touch was cold beyond cold, a chill that sank through my skin and into my bones and settled in my marrow like a splinter of ice that would never melt. But you helped us, she continued. Willingly or not, you carried us far from the place of our death. You gave us the blood we needed to grow strong, and for that we owe you a debt. I do not want your debt. I tried to pull away, but my body would not move. I do not want anything from you except to be left alone. That is not how this works, little one. She smiled again, and this time there was something almost like affection in it, a twisted, broken affection, but affection nonetheless. We are connected now, you and I, bound by blood and suffering and the miles we traveled together, and when you need us, truly need us, we will come. I do not want you to come. I will never need you. Never is a long time. Her hand dropped from my face, and the cold receded slightly enough for me to feel my limbs again. And life is full of surprises. You will face darkness in the years ahead, little one. Darkness that will make these past few days seem like a pleasant dream. And when that darkness comes, when you find yourself alone and afraid and desperate for any help you can find, remember this: we will be watching, we will be waiting, and we will answer your call. She began to fade, her form growing translucent, the moonlight shining through her as if she were made of smoke. But first, a gift. She raised her hand, and I felt something enter my mind. Not the commanding presence I had felt before, not the puppet strings that had controlled my body. This was gentler, more like a door being unlocked than a lock being forced. I will give you back what we took, your memories of what we made you do. You will remember everything, but you will also remember that you were not in control. You will carry the guilt because that is unavoidable, but you will also carry the truth. And perhaps in time that truth will set you free. Wait, I called out as she continued to fade. How did you die? Who killed you? But she was already gone. The last thing I saw was her smile, sad and terrible and knowing. And then there was nothing but the beach and the waves and the moon hanging full and bright in the sky. I sat there for a long time, feeling the cold slowly leave my body, feeling the memories she had unlocked settle into place. I remembered everything now, every detail, every moment. The knife, the pot, the dress, the voices. And I remembered something else too, a flash of image, brief but vivid, that had passed from her mind to mine in that final moment of contact. Two figures, a woman and a child, kneeling in a ditch beside a half-constructed road. Men standing over them, faces obscured by shadow, the sound of concrete being poured, the screams that no one heard. I did not know who those men were. I did not know why they had killed Esperanza and her daughter, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had never been caught. They had never been punished. They had lived out their lives in comfort and peace while their victims rotted beneath the highway. And somewhere in a part of my soul that I did not like to examine too closely, a small flame of anger began to burn. Maybe Esperanza was right. Maybe I would need her someday. Maybe there would come a time when the darkness she promised would descend upon my life, and I would find myself reaching out for any help I could find. But that time was not now, and until it came, I would do everything in my power to forget that this night had ever happened. I stood up, brushed the sand from my clothes, and walked back to the hotel. My father was still asleep when I slipped into the room, still lost in whatever dreams his exhausted mind had conjured to escape the horrors of the waking world. I climbed into my own bed, pulled the thin blanket over my body, and closed my eyes. For the first time in days, I slept without dreaming. We left Tijuana 2 days later after my father had rested and resupplied and done whatever business he had in the city. The drive back to Mexico City was long but uneventful. No dresses appeared, no voices whispered, no accidents befell the innocent. We passed through Mazatlan as the sun was setting, painting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. I looked out the window at the water and thought about the dress, wondered where it had gone, whether it was still out there somewhere waiting for another lonely soul to carry it on another terrible journey. We passed through Tepic in the middle of the night, and I kept my eyes closed, not wanting to see the gas station where I had burned a girl's face with boiling water. I wondered if she was still in the hospital. I wondered if she would ever recover. I wondered if she would spend the rest of her life looking in the mirror and seeing the monster that I had made her. We skirted Guadalajara, entirely taking a different route that added 2 hours to our journey, but kept us far from Zapopan, far from the house with the red brick walls and the purple flowers, and the kitchen floor stained with blood. My father did not explain why he chose this route. He did not have to. And finally, as dawn broke over the Valley of Mexico, we arrived home. The house looked exactly as we had left it, small and modest and unremarkable, with its peeling paint and its overgrown garden and its front door that stuck when you tried to open it. But to me, it looked like paradise. It looked like safety. It looked like the end of a nightmare that I had never expected to survive. My father turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, his hands still on the wheel, his eyes staring at nothing. "This trip," he said finally. "I do not know what happened out there. I do not know how that dress kept appearing, or why those accidents kept happening, or what any of it meant. But I know one thing." He turned to look at me, and in his eyes I saw something I had not seen since my mother died. Love. Pure, unconditional love. "I am glad we made it home safely," he said, "and I am glad you were with me. No matter what else happened, I would not have wanted to face it alone. I wanted to tell him the truth then. I wanted to confess everything, to lay my sins at his feet and beg for absolution. But when I opened my mouth, the only words that came out were the ones I had been saying for days. 'I love you too, Papa.'" He smiled, a tired but genuine smile, and reached out to ruffle my hair. "Let us go inside," he said. "I think we have both earned some rest." We climbed out of the truck and walked to the front door. My father fumbled with his keys, cursing under his breath as the lock resisted his efforts. I stood beside him, looking back at the truck, at the cabin where I had spent the worst week of my life, at the seat where the dress had lain between us like a sleeping serpent. It was over. Whatever had happened on those highways, whatever dark forces had used me as their instrument, it was over now. I was home. I was safe. I could start putting the pieces of my life back together, could begin the long process of becoming a normal boy again. Or so I believed. The truth I would learn much later was far more complicated. The things that Esperanza had set in motion during those 4 terrible days would continue to ripple outward for decades, touching lives I had never met, shaping events I could not have imagined. The debt she claimed I owed her, the promise she made to return when I needed her most, these were not idle words. They were prophecies waiting patiently for the right moment to come true. But that is a story for another time. For now I was just a 12-year-old boy standing on his front porch watching his father struggle with a stubborn lock, feeling the weight of unspoken confessions pressing against my chest like stones piled one upon another. For now I was just trying to survive. And in the end, I suppose that is all any of us can do. Survive the darkness, carry the guilt, and hope that when the dawn finally comes, there will still be enough of us left to step into the light. My father got the door open and we went inside. Behind us the sun rose over Mexico City, bright and warm and full of false promises, and somewhere far away on a highway near Morelia, a white dress lay in a ditch waiting for the next traveler to pick it up and carry it toward whatever destination the dead had chosen, waiting to begin the cycle again. 23 years passed. I grew up, I finished school. I found work first as a mechanic's apprentice, then as a truck driver like my father, then as a supervisor at a shipping company in Monterey. I married a woman named Elena who laughed easily and loved fiercely, and never once asked why I sometimes woke in the middle of the night with tears streaming down my face. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and I watched them grow with a mixture of joy and terror, always wondering if the darkness that had touched me would somehow reach them too. I never returned to the highways at night. I never picked up anything I found on the road, no matter how harmless it appeared. And I never, not once in all those years, told anyone what had happened during that week in 1994. The secret lived inside me like a tumor growing larger with each passing year, feeding on my silence. Some nights I could feel it pressing against my ribs, demanding to be released. Some nights I came so close to confessing that the words would gather on my tongue, ready to spill out at the slightest provocation. But I never spoke. The fear of being seen as a monster was stronger than the need to be understood. And then in 2017, everything changed. My father was 63 years old. His hair had turned completely white, and his hands, once so steady on the steering wheel, now trembled constantly. He had retired from driving 8 years earlier after a minor accident that left him shaken but unharmed. Since then, he had lived quietly in the same small house in Mexico City, tending a garden that my mother had planted decades ago, watching telenovelas in the afternoons, sleeping more and more as the years took their toll. The memory loss started slowly. First, he forgot small things, where he had put his glasses, what he had eaten for breakfast, the names of neighbors he had known for 30 years. Then the gaps grew larger. He forgot entire conversations. He forgot appointments. He forgot that my mother was dead and I would find him sitting by the window waiting for her to come home from a trip she had never taken. I visited him as often as I could, making the long drive from Monterey every other weekend. Each time he seemed a little further away, a little more lost in a fog that no medicine could lift. The doctors said it was dementia, a slow erosion of the mind that would eventually take everything he was. I knew I was running out of time. One evening in March, I sat beside him on the old couch in his living room. The television was on, but neither of us was watching. Outside rain was falling, a soft, steady rhythm that seemed to muffle the rest of the world. "Papa," I said, "there is something I need to tell you." He looked at me with eyes that were cloudy, but still somehow present. "What is it, mijo?" I took a deep breath. And then for the first time in 23 years, I told him the truth. Everything. The voices in my head, the way my body moved without my permission, the knife in Guadalajara, the boiling water in Tepic, the dress that I had brought back again and again while he slept or looked the other way. I told him about Esperanza and Lucia, about the beach in Tijuana, about the promise that had been made and the debt that still hung over my head. I told him about the guilt that had eaten me alive for more than 2 decades, the shame that had kept me silent, the fear that he would hate me if he ever learned what I had done. When I finished, there were tears running down both our faces. For a long moment, my father said nothing. He just sat there, his trembling hands folded in his lap, his eyes fixed on something I could not see. Then he reached out and took my hand in his. "Sebastian," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were a child, 12 years old. You were not in control of your own body. How can you blame yourself for something you did not choose to do?" "But my hands," I started. "Were not your hands," he interrupted gently. "They belonged to something else, something that used you, something that took advantage of your pain and your loneliness and your grief. You were a victim, mijo, not a perpetrator." I wanted to argue. I wanted to insist that I deserved his anger, his disgust, his condemnation. But the look in his eyes, the love and compassion and complete absence of judgment, it broke something inside me. For the first time in 23 years, I felt the weight begin to lift. All these years, my father continued, I wondered what had happened on that trip. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it, but I never imagined. He shook his head slowly. "I should have protected you better. I should have seen what was happening and stopped it. If anyone is to blame, it is me, no Papa. You could not have known." He squeezed my hand tighter. "I forgive you, Sebastian." "For whatever you think you did, for whatever guilt you have been carrying, I forgive you. Now you must learn to forgive yourself." I broke down then, sobbing like the child I had been when all of this started. My father held me, his arms thin but still strong, and we sat there together as the rain fell and the night grew dark, and the past finally began to loosen its grip on my heart. 3 months later, my father died in his sleep. The doctor said it was peaceful. His heart simply stopped beating sometime in the early hours of the morning, and he slipped away without pain or struggle or fear. A good death, they called it. The kind that everyone hopes for. But when I arrived at the house to collect his things, I found something that shattered any illusion of peace. He was lying in his bed exactly as I had expected, his hands folded across his chest, his face relaxed in an expression that might have been mistaken for sleep. The room smelled of the lavender soap he had always used, mixed with something older and fainter that I could not quite identify. Then I saw the fabric. A small piece of white cloth, no larger than my palm, rested on his chest, directly over his heart. It was old and stained, and slightly damp to the touch, and the moment my fingers brushed against it, I knew exactly what it was, a piece of the dress. After 23 years, it had found its way back. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of how it had gotten there. That was when I noticed the wall above his bed. Words had been written there, carved into the plaster, with something sharp letters jagged and uneven, as if traced by a hand that was no longer used to holding tools. She said she would remember. I spun around looking for the source, looking for whoever had broken into my father's house and desecrated his death. But the room was empty. The windows were locked. The door had been bolted from the inside. There was no one here but me and the body of my father and the impossible message on the wall. And then I saw the mirror. It hung on the wall opposite the bed, an old thing with a wooden frame that my mother had bought at a market decades ago. I had looked into that mirror 1,000 times as a child, checking my reflection, making faces, pretending to be someone else. Now, as I stared into it, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. My reflection stood exactly as it should, frozen in place, eyes wide with terror. But behind my reflection, visible only in the glass, stood a woman. She wore a white dress, long and stained and rotting at the edges. Her hair was black and hung down past her waist, tangled and matted with something dark. Her face was old, lined with decades of suffering, but her eyes were the same as they had been on that beach in Tijuana. Empty, black, endless. Esperanza. I whirled around, but there was no one there. Just the empty room, the body of my father, the silence pressing in from all sides. I turned back to the mirror. She was still there, still standing behind my reflection, still watching me with those terrible eyes. And now she was smiling. I did not scream. I did not run. I simply stood there paralyzed as the truth crashed over me like a wave. She had never left. She had been with me all along, hiding in the shadows, waiting in the mirrors, watching from the spaces between heartbeats. 23 years of silence had not been freedom. It had been patience. And now my father was gone. The only person who knew my secret, the only person who had forgiven me, the only anchor I had left to the world of the living. I was alone. The smile in the mirror grew wider. I thought running would save me. I thought distance could break the bond between us. I thought that if I put enough miles between myself and Mexico, enough years between myself and that terrible week in 1994, I would finally be free. For 12 years, I almost believed it. I left that house and never returned. I sold it through a lawyer, instructing him to dispose of everything inside. I did not attend the funeral. I did not say goodbye. I simply drove north as fast as my car would take me, crossing the border into Texas and not stopping until I reached a city where no one knew my name. I live in Arizona now, in a quiet suburb outside Phoenix. My children are grown with families of their own. My wife Elena passed away 3 years ago, cancer, the same disease that took my mother. I am alone in a house that is too large for one person, surrounded by possessions that no longer bring me joy, waiting for an ending that I can feel approaching with every passing day. Last night I heard the crying again. It came from somewhere inside my head, just as it had all those years ago. A child's voice, thin and distant, calling out from a darkness I could not see, and then beneath the crying another voice, older, familiar, cold as the grave. I told you I would remember. I told you I would come when you needed me, and now, little one, your time of need has arrived. I tried to push the voice away. I tried to fill my mind with other thoughts, other memories, anything to drown out the whisper, but it was too strong, too insistent, too patient. You are old now, the voice continued, alone, forgotten, just like I was, just like Lucia was. Do you understand now? Do you finally see how it feels to be buried alive while the world moves on without you? What do you want? I asked, speaking aloud to an empty room like a madman. The same thing I have always wanted. The voice seemed to smile. Blood, pain, justice. And you, little one, are going to help me get it, just like before, just like always. I felt my hands begin to move, lifting from the armrests of my chair without my permission. I felt my legs push me to my feet. I felt my body turn toward the kitchen where the knives waited in their block, sharp and patient and ready. But this time the voice whispered, this time, we do not just want blood from strangers. My feet carried me forward one step at a time. This time we want yours. I am telling you this story because I do not have much time left. Whatever happens tonight, whether I fight and win or surrender and lose, someone needs to know the truth. Someone needs to understand what really happened on those highways in 1994. Someone needs to carry the warning forward to tell others what I wish someone had told me. Never pick up what you find on the road at night. No matter how harmless it looks, no matter how curious you are, no matter how much you think it cannot possibly hurt you. Because the things that wait in the darkness, the things that hide in discarded clothes and abandoned objects and forgotten places, they are not looking for possessions. They are looking for vessels. If you ever hear a child crying inside your head, if you ever feel your hands moving without your permission, if you ever look in a mirror and see someone standing behind you who is not there when you turn around, remember this story. Remember that I tried to warn you. Remember that I thought I was free for 23 years and I was wrong. And remember that they are patient. They can wait decades, centuries, forever if that is what it takes. Because the dead have nothing but time. I can feel them inside me now as I speak these words. They are listening. They are watching. They are waiting for me to finish so they can take back control. They want me to tell you one last thing. They are not just inside me. They are everywhere, in every object left on the roadside, in every piece of clothing abandoned in a ditch, in every forgotten thing that once belonged to someone who died in pain and anger and despair, and they are always looking for new carriers, new instruments, new hands to do their work, so the next time you're driving alone at night and you see something white lying in the road ahead, do not stop, do not slow down, do not even look, just keep driving and pray that they do not notice you. Have you ever picked up something from the road and brought it home? Have you ever heard voices in your head that did not belong to you? Have you ever looked in a mirror and seen something that should not be there? If so, tell me your story. Share it in the comments below. Let me know that I am not alone in this. And if you have not experienced any of these things yet, if you are still safe, still untouched by the darkness that waits on the highways of this world, then consider yourself lucky. But do not forget to subscribe. Do not forget to come back, because this is only the first story. There are more, many more. Tales of the ghosts and demons and monsters that haunt the roads of Mexico and beyond. Tales of people like me who picked up the wrong thing at the wrong time and paid the price for the rest of their lives. I will tell you all of them, if they let me live long enough. Sleep well tonight, and remember to check your mirrors before you turn off the lights. You never know who might be watching.